Oh, you went through that whole thing with that expandable ball toy,
Yeah.
and that when it's collapsed, it seems like there's a self there, but it's like healthy state is to be open, so that it's not that, so that the what's coming from other can move through it, and it's not that the resonance isn't felt, or it's not that it doesn't have some frequency to it that you can resonate with or register, but it's not identity. But when it's collapsed, it feels like identity. And then you start talking about how, like, when you're in that state, you're entirely defined by the external. That if you are collapsed there, you're kind of defined by what seems to attack it or what seems to contradict it. But if it's open, then you actually know what, or you begin to know what self actually is. But that's externally defined when it's collapsed into a point, which I thought was really profound and worth saying more about. But I don't know if I understand, like, because we were talking about like identity politics, or kind of how just how people are trying to say, like, I am this and not that, or, you know, I believe this, I don't believe that, they're wrong, I'm right. But all of those things are being externally defined when your identity is collapsed around some specific point. And so with that, like, it's, you know, it's less stable, it's more fragile. Is that a fair summary or translation of what you were saying?
Another way to talk about it is the idea of a quantum field, and that the quantum field is the truth. That's more the primary condition, if you will. And then as soon as you collapse that field as soon as you collapse the wave function and move from a field to a particle, now that particle is subject to danger, subject to threat, that when it was in a field state, it's not. So if you take a position, if you take a stance, if you hunker down and try to claim a certain structure or territory, then the game is on, as far as that thing having to try to hold against, the forces around it. Which is just different than if your mind, for example, is in a field state. Then, you can just tolerate stuff that you can't tolerate if you lock down.
Yeah.
And the thing that is tricky for the ego mind is to be in that open field state. The ego mind then is literally confused, right? So the confusional state, you become aware, like it's just this open, infinite probability. And the ego starts to go, well, wait, I'm confused, I'm psychotic, who am I, where am I? And the general idea is you're nothing. You're not anybody. But so if you just feel that right now, just even if I say, for example, if I say, whatever, I'm really into this this new band, right? And so you feel how, if I haven't told you anything but that yet, you're just kind of in this open.
Yeah, for sure. But there's also like a part of me that's like, oh, Lance is going to like pick something that's like I need to defend about. So then I'm like looking for the thing I have to defend, It's how it was set up. So, but I hear what you're saying. So yeah, let's say in theory you're just like, oh, I heard this new band. I might just be like, oh, inquisitive, or like what, like, oh, like
Yeah.
what band?
Or let's make it less loaded. If I say, okay, I'm gonna say a number to you, right?
Yeah.
And let's just say a number 1 through 10. And so I'm going to tell you the number right now.
Okay.
So, so that state,
Yeah.
You feel how the ego mind hates it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like right there, suddenly, like you're on the verge of rage.
I'm just trying. Yeah, I'm trying to reach through the screen and make you say the number I want you to say.
Yeah. So to sit and be in that open, not knowing,
Yeah.
just like waiting state, we have this aversion to it.
Yeah.
But then notice if you bring your attention to that very mind state, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just stay in it. And notice that you can stay in that. And then you can also continue to think, and you continue to, like, it's not like, oh, you're just on pause. It's just that you're not collapsing into a thing. It's just open. And you can still argue very intensely if you want.
Yeah.
But you don't have to grab the point.
But it feels like I do.
Yeah.
So like,
And
even if I stay
more.
open, like there's like a piece of me that's like still back there, wondering about that number. So like I can keep talking to you and like be open, but I can feel that the part of me looking for that number is still closed and back there.
Yeah. And what if you just accept, I'm never going to tell you?
Well, yeah, I feel like that's like, I feel like I had to. I feel I was more locked into it, and then like I just kind of like notice it, that part of me, and then just like move on. But I have to accept that, and it feels. I mean, it's like it's playful now, but like if it was a different scenario, I think it would be like it would change the tone of the rest of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of like leave irritated. It'd be like trying to think of like a weightier one, but the feeling is the same. Like regardless of the content, like that feels like that would be like that could really get magnified.
Yeah. So when and you use the word playful, which I think is important. If you understand a certain game and you get somewhat adept at it, then you can allow that, okay, there's infinite probability, for example, within the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't feel lost or angry or terrified because you're not, that, okay, you can't organize that. You're staying.
Yeah.
And you allow chaos within the thing. Whereas if you try to go in and grab onto a portion of the chaos, then you're just going to get thrown around.
Yeah.
And so this idea that at any level, just to zoom out and just allow that, okay, I'm not going to try to organize all that, right?
Yeah.
It's like having a junk drawer. It's like you decide, okay, you can get more detailed and organize the junk drawer, right? But there's just all these contexts. It's like at what point do you just let it be chaotic?
Yeah.
And good.
Well, I was watching a show, a TV show the other day, and I think we've talked about this before. There's a certain part of me, at least when I watch something, where I'm almost trying to will it to be something. Like I want the show to go a certain way, or I
Mm,
want a character to do a certain thing. I
mhm.
kind of realize it's like really what I want is for it to be as crazy as possible. Like I want the whole thing to not like to do whatever it wants and like not do what I think it should, because
Mm,
that's more fun is to just like what's going to happen
right.
instead of like, well, I think this is going to happen. If it doesn't, it's stressful. Or like, you know, like a movie is scary and it's like, oh, I don't want to be scared. And like, it's like, well, no, the movie should be as scary as it can. And so there's just this like unconscious will trying to exert over something like absurd, like a TV show that
Yeah.
feels like related to what you're talking about. Like the rules of the game are bigger than
Yeah.
like this moment, like this jump scare that's coming up. Like,
Yeah.
so I like the game analogy for it. That there's this thing out here and it's a space, and like whatever happens there is just that, and it's not anything bigger than that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it sounds weird, but I feel in a to a certain degree in touch with some kind of level, some kind of lens. It doesn't just feel like an idea to me. I feel in touch with a thing where it just feels like even if there's nuclear war and the entire earth is just wiped out and all the humans with it, like that thing is still just going to be fine.
Yeah,
And it feels like the true essence of any of us, any of the stuff going on earth, nature, this, that, like it's all fine, it'll all be fine.
yeah,
In the same way that winter comes to Minnesota and the leaves start falling off the trees, and I'm not running around panic trying to prevent that. It's like it's fine, like nature is doing a thing,
yeah.
you know and and again, it's not like I wouldn't freak out on a personal level, but simultaneously it's like, well, but at some point I'll die, and then like it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that's saying it's fine doesn't die.
Right.
Everything is contained within that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, not just in some conceptual way, but I
right.
have a felt sense of that is what my experience is. And then it's when I notice, for example, working with clients who don't have that, it's a whole different
Yeah, say it's
experience.
most people.
I think it is yeah, a lot of people.
Well, and it's context dependent, right? So I mean, you can feel that sometimes and lose it depending on the context. But there's definitely a deep personalization to it that I think is scary. So like you said, like your personal self doesn't lose sight of like the threat to this physical manifestation.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the thought right before the bomb gets to you, like there's oh, it'll be fine.
So confusional states, they're really important in various ways. In order to learn, in order to adapt, in order to reorient, we have to be able to tolerate confusion. And confusion is a movement towards chaos, right? And in general, we want order instead of chaos, especially in our cognitive mind. But when you have order, there's a tendency to grab it and then to feel secure, to feel correct, to feel valid. And again, contextually, there's certainly a place for that. You know, if you're trying to get somewhere and, you know, you're driving, it's like, well, you want to have a sense of, okay, I know where I'm going, or, you know, we're going the correct way, versus like, I don't know, you know, I'm in a confusional state and we're just driving.
Just do that by yourself. Don't chaotically drive people places. Oh, sorry. I said do that by yourself. Don't like chaotically drive people places.
Right.
Just pick your moment.
Yeah. And you're supposed to feel anxiety or insecurity when you're like, wait a minute, I don't know if we're going the right way.
Yeah.
But yeah, by the same token, okay, can you tolerate the experience of not knowing, the experience of letting someone else know and you not know, right? It's like when you're confused, if you sit and be confused and you allow it, you can either identify with it and then it's a quick trip to madness, or if you let go of it, then there starts to be more of a existential nothingness starts to arise. In the same way that in a conversation, let's say with either just even with one other person, let alone a group of people, if you get lost and you start noticing, I don't know what the hell we're talking about, right? Or there's stuff being talked about that you're just not familiar with. It's like, well, then you start to, it's like, well, I don't have any input because the conversation right now is about, you know, something that I don't know anything about. And it's a strange feeling, right? You start feeling like, well, you know, do I exist? Do I have any value? Is there any point in me being here? How much longer are we going to talk about this thing that I'm not involved in?
Yeah.
And if you just be aware of that and be aware, like, okay, right now I have no value to add. I have no, like, I'm not even, there's less and less of an awareness that I'm even here. But then it's okay, but do you still exist? You know? And what you'll start to notice is you do seem to still have this awareness that's there. And you start to be able to ideally rest into that.
There's that aloneness. I mean, there's that, it's kind of it's a good example, because we've talked about it a little bit, but just that kind of the importance of that feeling, the alone feeling. So maybe we can talk about that related to this confusional state.
Right.
But I like that, you know, a conversation you feel lost in is an opportunity to sit in that and realize that you still exist. This just is a good I like that. Do some work while people talk about things you don't understand.
Yeah. It's a good exercise to do it with music, where, like, if you listen to classical or if you listen to jazz, where you and then notice when you can't find the beat, you know, there's music where you start, it's like it starts to just sound like noise.
Yeah.
But if you know that, okay, well, there is some kind of beat, there is some kind of melody. It's like you just can't find it at the time, right?
Yeah.
And to sit in that, and instead of desperately trying to find it, it's like, can you just sit and hold an open space and wait for it, right? Because my understanding is one of the things that's pleasurable about music is that there's, it could be similar to watching a movie like you were talking about. You have to have some general sense of what's going on, right? When you're just in a movie and you're like, what the hell's going on? I don't even understand what happened. There's something that feels really good when you do become aware of structures, when you become aware of deeper plot lines, when you become aware of organizations. And then as you're aware in a certain way, and then like you said, and then there's a plot twist, right? There's a surprise. And my understanding of jazz is that's a big part of it, is you're expecting this certain thing and then it completely plays on it.
Yeah.
And it's like if you lose it too much, it just becomes chaos, right? And this idea of seeing the structure that is inherently there. And then there's a release from anxiety because we find, it's seeing the forest for the trees, it's or seeing the forest as opposed to just being lost in the trees, right? Because we've all got that going on in all kinds of different dimensions. There's certain dimensions that I feel like, okay, I've got a sense of the forest. And so I can allow the trees to just be there and to be all chaotic and random. In certain dimensions where you can't, you're lost and you have anxiety there, or you're, desperately trying to grab onto this or that. And then in other dimensions, it's the opposite. You're able to sit and you have this certain understanding, and I don't. Just in the same way right now, if I flew out to your house and we're driving around, it's like, well, you have a sense of the area, I don't.
Yeah.
So to me, I'd have to be tolerating the not knowing state with regard to that map, where you have a sense of it, so you'd have a more secure feeling about it. And that might feel exciting to me, or I might feel, anxious and have it feel negative. But I'm just saying, at any given moment, it's about what's our contextual focus, and can we arrive at a contextual focus that feels secure, that feels like it's, this idea of discovering what's there, what's real, versus making something up, right? So like with music, or even with mathematics, it's like, are we creating math? Are we creating music theory, or are we discovering it? And generally speaking, it seems to be this discovery, right? Like these notes and these harmonies and these chords and these octaves, it's like they exist, and over time humans discovered it. Like, hey, there's an organization to this, there's a structure to this.
Yeah.
That seems to exist, like prior to your cognitive machinations, and the more we discover these structures, these organizations, the more there's something very thrilling and very securing in the human mind. And then with, as far as confusional states, I'm saying it's also important to instead of just desperately trying to not have confusion and experience the control and the security, there's also a place for increasing your tolerance of a confusional state and allowing. So again, like if I come out and visit you and we drive around, do I decide not to come out and visit because I don't want the anxiety of not knowing, the territory?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that kind of sucks if I can't go and allow the fun and the excitement and the growth, that would happen by being able to allow that. Can you go to a different country and where you don't know the language? It's like, oh shit, there's something scary about that.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, there's something exciting.
Even going to a new restaurant and not knowing what to order.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, or ordering something at the restaurant you always go to, but ordering something that you haven't ordered.
Yeah.
I have like the thing I order at each restaurant.
Yeah.
And it feels like every once in a while, I'm like, I wonder, if I should get this other, and then it's like, it just feels too risky.
Oh, no, you got to do it. That's the thing too, is like, usually it is too risky. So as someone that does just like, I do like, I'll just give, like, I like have things I like, but eventually I'm just like, I have to find out if this is good too. And then it usually isn't as good as the thing I really like, but and then I'll just be like, Sky, why did I do that again? Like, why did I try a new thing that I know
But then if you do like it, now whenever you go there, now you got to try to decide which thing to get.
Yeah. That's not so bad. Then it's like a treat. It's like, oh, what am I gonna surprise myself with today?
Good.
Well, no, I like the tolerance idea as far as like, what are the symptoms of not having any tolerance for that?
I mean, control, anxiety, because anxiety comes when there's a confusional state.
Yeah.
People freak out about feeling dumb or invalid. Like I've talked about it with politics, it's like, look, in general, there's such a not knowing, and I mean, I don't know who really runs this country. I don't know, I don't really know what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. I don't know if you put me in charge. I don't know exactly how I'd tweak the economy to make it better.
Yeah.
I don't know if or when abortion is okay or not.
Yeah.
Now we got to make decisions, but can't we start from like, we don't really know?
No.
Because the truth is, I don't even know who I am or what the fuck I'm doing or how I got here or how life is possible or what life is or what God is, or, and I don't know when I'm going to die, and I don't know. I mean, there's a not knowing. I mean, the truth is there's an intense, vast not knowing.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm doing this. I have no fucking idea how I can do that.
Yeah.
I just sort of intend it or think it, and it's happening. And it can, and it's not just a matter of, oh my God, I can make it go up in the air, but it's like quite intricate, and I can type, and I can, and again, that thing where it's like, I can tell you that, well, my brain sends a signal to the, this nerve, and then and it's like, yeah, but same thing is like, I don't know how this freaking computer works. I have no idea how there's some satellite or whatever sending like an image of you that's showing up on this computer screen right now. It's an absolute miracle to me And if you ask me to go make that, or go, create that, or starting from scratch, it's like, man, I wouldn't have the first clue.
Yeah.
I don't even know what a computer chip. I'm still baffled. I don't know what the fuck a computer chip is.
Yeah. It's interesting the contrast you're making between creating and discovering, kind of with all that like there's a thing, was it Salk and the polio vaccine, and they're like, what are you going to do with it? Like, you're going to sell it? And he's like, what, I sell the sun? Like, he discovered it, he didn't create it. And so there's just like this attitude we have that we're creating things instead of discovering them. And
Yeah.
I like that they're all it's all miraculous, and it's like to claim some knowledge as a result, some ability to conceptually describe a miracle and not acknowledge the miraculous nature of the discovery is pretty ham-fisted.
Yeah. And even ideas, or music, or
Yeah.
it just comes through. And
Well, it also takes away like the art of it. Like, regardless, even if it's not something we call art, like if it's the internet or if it's a Zoom call, right? And then we're going to call that technology that we create instead of like art we've discovered. Right? There's just the whole like psychotic obsession with selling it, selling what you create instead of like sharing what you discover. It's an interesting contrast.
Yeah. And it comes back to, how we've joked about, we're like, what are we doing here? We're like selling consciousness.
Yeah, for sure.
Selling the idea of dimensions.
Yeah, just selling a conceptual description of a miracle. What are you gonna do? I don't know.
I think it's helpful in personal growth, in healing. With clients, I see it all the time where they're trying to figure it out. It's like, how do I take more control and get this figured out? And in general, it's typically, no, you like got to go the other way. You got to like let it come undone. Certainly with awakening. The awakening happens when you come off of the control. And when you come off the control, then what you notice is it's chaotic. It's confusional. It's way more multidimensional than you thought. And initially that can be frightening, but when you start to recognize, well, you're still fine, you're still there, you still exist. So to sit in open contemplative meditation, same idea, right? To allow the open, chaotic, confused nothingness, or the nothingness that starts to emerge out of the confusion. I don't know. I get this is saying the same thing, I guess, but in general, my understanding is, in my experience, is there's these archetypal, libidinal energies. There's this death drive. There's this aggression, this libido, these archetypal energies and forms that exist, let's say, in body. And when you come off of your control with the ego mind, initially it's, oh my God, I feel confused, and it's like, yeah, okay, but the next thing, if you can tolerate that you don't fucking know and all the resistance there, so does that mean I'm stupid? Does that mean I'm wrong? Does that mean I'm invalid? Does that mean, and it's like, yes, it does. It means all those things. Because relative to the all, our cognitive mind knows almost nothing, right? But if you can work through all that and allow a certain kind of openness, it seems like, oh, great, that's great. Because then there's just a peaceful, open mind state. The downside of that is that body almost immediately goes, well, here's some deeper archetypal shit that you have that's has just been queued up waiting for you to relax a little bit.
Yeah.
And that archetypal stuff is often, the deep, dark archetypal death, violence, sex, fear, all the terrible things, right? All the things that the ego mind's afraid of.
Yeah.
And so there's a real tendency to clamp back down. But this idea that, okay, can you let them move? And instead of the ego mind clamping down, can you let consciousness be the organizer? Can you let consciousness be the container? And that's a flow state, right? That's a flow state where then those energies move through the mind, and the mind isn't repressing them. The mind isn't curating them all. The mind isn't, projecting them and controlling them and compartmentalizing them, but rather it can come through, and consciousness allows or consciousness is the organizer, consciousness is the container. And when that happens, not only is it exhilarating for the person who's experiencing that, but then others get to experience it in that same kind of way. So when Prince is on stage, or when Prince is in the studio or whatever, and he's obviously in this flow state and stuff's just coming through, not only does he seem excited about it, or ecstatic about it, or deeply moved by it, but then we get to feel that.
Yeah.
And we watch and go, damn, I wish I could let energy flow through me like that.
Mm.
I wish I could be that deeply in touch with those vibrations, with those archetypal structures. And thank you, Prince, for channeling that from wherever you channeled it from, through you into this dimension, so that I could get a taste of that.
Yeah.
And and we're all doing that in certain ways. My sense is we're all, this idea that our energy field, one of the aspects of it is we have all these portals in us. And so, for example, the 3-dimensional linear space-time, as far as that world, that dimension, which is if you say there's just the dimension itself, and if you say that's just, let's say, lifeless, right? Like if it was just inorganic matter, if you just have this like cement room, like a jail cell, but then, what can you bring into that room? Can you shine a light into that room? What if you bring organic soil into that room? What if you bring conscious presence into that room? And I feel like we're doing that in the world. You know, there's all these portals that are illuminating various dimensions.
The portal you're talking about is within ourselves, or between each other, or between ourselves and something else?
I think it's all the above, but like each energy center is a portal. Let me say it this way. And I talked about this before, where I think we tend to look at three-dimensional space as this infinite black space, right? That is the universe. And then there's these stars that are these fireballs that are sitting in infinite space, right? But a different idea, a different model would be that those stars are actually portals to other realms. So in the same way that the room you're in, there's windows, right? And if you look at a window, if you said that window was a star, and the room you're in is the universe. So you got that window that I can see to your right. You probably have other windows in that room. And you're aware that those windows are actually portals out of that room you're in, right? Like you could go, you know, that they're allowing light to shine from actually outside that room into the room you're in. The light's not originating at the glass, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that all these energy centers in us are really portals like that. And so they are bringing light, bringing energy, bringing a certain frequency range. So for example, I'm sitting here, and to the extent that I bring, you know, various energetics into this room I'm in, or interact with you, I'm suggesting that those energies are coming from a certain realm through the portal that is my particular chakra, my particular energy center. And then, you know, expressed to you, just like energy, right? Like there's a conversion, but any light, any energy, any electricity, etc., it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And so there's this, you know, circulating and going in and out of various portals and various realms and various dimensions. And when you sort of allow for that, you know, again, it's like the sailing versus the motorboat thing, that you become aware that your particular field is a set of portals, is a set of, you know, it's a vessel. It's a channel. We're much more, it's much more about streaming than it is about, you know, storing on your hard drive. Right? Like what I, Lance Hauge, have to offer anybody, myself, the world, anybody, is much more about, well, what can I allow myself to stream? And certain stuff is streamed to me, and I just download it and hide it and keep it for myself.
Yeah.
and maybe because I want it only for me, or maybe because I'm ashamed of it and don't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
And and it's like, well, fuck, if I'm streaming it from down below, it might feel like, well, God, that seems really bad,
Yeah.
if generally speaking, hell is below and heaven's above, right?
Yeah.
So but at the same time, it can be a good thing to stream from below if we're going to stream it up into a container that can hold it, or a container that can transmute it, right?
Yeah.
But again, in general, this idea of the soul structures, or the emptiness, or just the presence, that we are just this presence. But as far as on the ego level and these energy centers, we're just channeling shit, we're just moving it through. And we get so hung up when we try to grab it and hang on to it and have it be an object.
Yeah.
It's a field. So again, as we're sitting here, you and I aren't real concerned about which one of us has the better laptop.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever, it's just a device that, and if you have a newer one, or you've got more memory, or if you have the latest processor or whatever, fine. But like, I mean, it's just a tool. And it's like, well, here, hopefully you can get, that too, so we can do even more fun, creative stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with this guy, like,
yeah.
And if I have a awakening, or I, learn some shit, or I spend time getting to have knowledge about a certain thing, it's like, great. But again, the thing that, like you were saying, it's the thing that gets channeled, the thing that gets produced, the thing that comes through is really a thing that already exists, that I've just developed the machinery to bring it through. So, but it's a radical shift, it's like the Copernican shift, where it decenters the me.
Yeah.
The stuff that gets channeled through us that doesn't necessarily come from accomplishment or discipline, or, I mean, it can, and there's that, but there's also that idea that where people are, there's the Leonard Cohen quote, everyone's, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like, everyone's cracked, that's how the light gets in.
Yeah.
And you have all these, the seems like the greatest artists were also, deeply wounded.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why? And I think, like I've said, I think a lot of my gifts with regard to the things I work with, it was largely the result of a head injury. So I just think we're full of ourselves. It's like, look, if you have a special talent or something, we take credit for it, and then we also take credit for like these bad things. And I'm just saying, I don't know where the real credit is. I don't remember. I don't know why I get to be relatively healthy at 51 and relatively, living in a situation that's much better than a lot of people as far as safety or wealth, or I don't know why. I don't remember doing something to like deserve it more than other people.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly, I have no, I mean, do you?
No.
Right?
Well, I could build a narrative, but it's not really true.
Right. And then you could say, well, we choose it. We choose, and it's like, all right, well, I don't remember choosing it either.
Yeah, right.
But it's a strange thing to kind of let go in that way, and just and it's like, well, yeah, but then where's responsibility, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, it's this weird dialectic relationship between be a self, take responsibility, try hard, do good work, try to understand, try to get organized, and at the same time, you know,
Yeah, it's kind of, when do you say, like in the developmental process, right? In this kind of like arc of development, like when do you start like going after confusional states? Because it doesn't,
yeah,
it's not from the start, it's not, yeah, like you could help someone like a child,
mhm,
like try to help like contain that, but you can't conceptually explain this is a confusional state and this is what you're going to need to co-develop along with your attempts at organization and personhood.
yeah. Um, well, certainly, I mean, we could talk child development, but if we're talking healing, for example,
Okay.
let's just say adults, but it'd be the same for children. But to notice, well, and what are you suffering? What kind of tension is there? What kind of problem? What's your, at any given moment, what are you struggling with? And even just to decide, okay, I'm going to allow 60 seconds of just sitting with the confusion and just let myself be confused about it. And what you'll notice is it starts to move. It's that it's not just static, that you start to have a sense, oh, if I sat here for an hour, like it wouldn't just be exactly like this an hour from now, because it's not even exactly like that 60 seconds later. And then but then we don't trust it. It's like, oh my God, in an hour, I'm going to be batshit crazy, right? Or I'm going to disappear, or I'm going to die, or I'm going to explode with rage. I can't just allow this. And it's like, okay, but what if you titrate that? What if you allow it a little bit? What if you allow it a little bit and then let yourself integrate and organize? And then allow a little bit of it again, and then integrate and organize. And so just to start to notice, in the same way we do with our body, in the same way we do with external things, we play with it a little bit, allow it to get a little disorganized, and then okay, no, maybe put it back how you had it. But we do that, right? And it's like ideally we can do that in our mind as well. Can we allow, okay, what's the experience when you back off even on a topic that you think you're quite masterful at? And what is this intuitive thing that seems to be there underlying the cognitive rational? Because there's this, again, to feel that flow and to be aware that, well, that ego me is really riding on that train.
Yeah.
You're not even really the conductor. There's this flow happening, and even the ideas you have, right? The ego me is like, I have an idea. And it's like, oh yeah, weren't you given an idea?
Mm.
You know, didn't that idea come from somewhere where you didn't actually create it, and you didn't even really decide which idea was going to come?
Mm.
Right? Like what's prior to you having your big idea? Or as far as what you think, it's like, well, why do you think what you think means anything? You know, like, you know, it's this weird thing. Like we think as far as what we think, what our view is, what our opinion is, what our understanding is, like we really, you know, like I've said before, we're in a societal organization now where everyone's on the hook to have to think so much. Everyone's on the hook to, like, you know, it used to be there were these societal structures, and just like with a kid, at a certain age, the kid can have the kid's thoughts and ideas and desires and whatever, and that's great, but, you know, shut up and get in the car, you know, because you're gonna operate within, you know, or the employee, you know, in certain jobs, at certain jobs, you're not hired for your ideas, right? You're hired to carry out someone else's ideas, for example. And I'm just saying that there's a way that it's really good that humans are more and more, that the individual is more and more valid, right? Where it used to be that the state took precedence over the individual. And now the individual, every individual is philosophizing about what they think God is, what they think truth is, what they think self is. And everyone's got ideas about politics. Everyone thinks they have ideas about what would make this country better. They think they know something about economics, or they think they know something about the military, or, you know, how to prevent crime. And I'm just trying to zero in on when we have the experience of, well, I think, and it's like, okay, what, like when you say that, what do you know, is that a revelation that you're having? Is that math you did that made you arrive at, you know, are you coming from just a prejudice? Are you coming from a way that just seems the safest? Are you thinking that because your underlying motive is that that'll make you look the coolest? And I think it's important to allow that we all do all those things I just listed. But we tend to just go, well, I'm thinking it. So, you know, therefore, you know, I think, therefore, you know, like that's ground zero. Like, where are you going to go from there? I think it.
Yeah, the whole history of the universe led up to that thought. It's,
Right. In psychology, the idea of the mind as an object, right? We literally, our psyches because I'm not just talking about arrogance, right? Or narcissism or whatever. I'm talking about in the human psyche, we have a serious, serious problem happening. And it's more and more the case that literally the initial state of the human being is an out of control, terrified, self-destructive mess that's violent and hungry and lustful and greedy and chaotic. And this is true of the individual person as well as any group of individuals. And we know this, it's proven over and over and over again. You even start to release some controls and you start to get chaos. So then the question is, how should we control it? What kind of organizational structures do there need to be? And what creates a healthy, what is healthy? What is the goal? What's better versus what's worse, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this understanding within the individual psyche, and a lot of it carries over to group psychology as well, but we can organize via object relating, we can organize via attachment, we can organize via dependence, we can organize via worshiping, we can organize via a set of rules. And those are all good and important. And there's a developmental scale to these things, right? Initially, when you're an infant, you're organized by someone else's actions. That's how you're organized. Because you aren't organizing shit, right? You're just laying there.
Shit's the only thing you're organizing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to eat everything and then you're just producing shit. That's your contribution at that point. And you're not even viable, right? Like the infant, meaning on their own, like others are organizing everything, keeping the child alive, keeping them warm, keeping them fed, keeping them from eating stuff they shouldn't eat, keeping them from harm. And so others are organizing you. And at a certain point, okay, you start to get a sense of your own physical body and you start to organize that. And so there's learning that happens, right? And what I'm getting at is at a certain point, you're organized by your parents' rules, right? And you do this or don't do that because mom or dad said. And you're not having ideas about should you do it or not. It's just mom or dad said. And then you hit a point where you start having ideas and you start asking why. No, you can't go do that. Why? And then you get the thing that, that line of reasoning that eventually results in because I said so. Right? Because there's no real satisfactory answer to the why. But that's a level, right, of self-organization. You just follow the rules. But you start asking why. Okay, now, but then you start noticing, okay, but I got to do it anyway, even if I don't know why. Or you might even get to where you have your own ideas and you might think, I disagree, actually. I think that I should be able to do it. Okay, fine. But that's a level. But we there's a huge shift that happens when you shift from organizing yourself via external structures to having this thing be the thing you organize yourself by. So instead of, I'm going to continue to relate and interact and be aware of my dependence on my and it becomes more and more of an interdependence, right? But that I'm not some soul entity. I'm not, meaning in your body and mind, you're not. I think there's an individual soul entity in there, but you're you're more of a channel, you're more of a vessel, and you're constantly interacting, and there's an interdependence going on. And instead of constantly adjusting and adapting and learning and letting go, we're doing a thing in our society in various ways that I've explained throughout this podcast, where that what it facilitates, what it fosters is a disconnecting from all these relational structures and going up into here and grabbing on, like someone who can't swim, and then, oh my God, there's a thing I can grab onto. And we literally organize ourselves around this energy center in the head that is the thinker. And our thinking gets rigid because we can't allow confusion, we can't allow doubt, we can't allow not knowing. So we clamp on, and then we think, oh, well, you have a knowing. We know what's right, we know what's wrong. And not only does it cause all kinds of problems relationally, physically, not only is it a recipe for depression and anxiety, but it makes for absolute ideologues, which you obviously have in our culture. Everyone's a freaking ideologue, shouting their truth as if it's the truth. And I'm saying that's not just a conceptual thing. I'm saying that energetically, you can't just go now and say, hey, you should ease up on that, on that contraction that you're oriented to as self. And it's like, yeah, that would be good, except if they start to let go of that, you're going to have a psychotic break. The person is not viable. They don't have the underlying structures to even let go of that. So it's a really bad situation. If you put virtual reality glasses on, that's a matrix in there. It has its particular way it operates. But it's not ontological. It's not the source of truth. It's not what gives you value. It's not coming up with anything on its own.
Yeah. But it's our go-to, not only as a reference for truth, but we are energetically locked on it, Yeah.
And literally, if a person starts, for any of us, if that starts to get, if the structure we've, locked into starts to get unstable, we not only can't think right, we not only feel confused and kind of scared, but we physically, get unbalanced. We got to go lay down.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that doesn't need to be the case.
Right.
Really, we'd have all these levels of energetic structure and balance, and so that can be chaotic, which is what the truth of it is.
Mm.
You don't need to keep it collapsed into certain, objects all the time.
Yeah. Does everything below that, if it's not organized, try to express through that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be a pathway.
Yeah. Well, it is a pathway, and regardless, right? So I guess what I'm asking, I think that makes sense. So like, if there's this developmental structure below it, that if it's allowed to be open and chaotic, and those kind of things can come up through that. But let's say you're locked into that with no connection to the underlying structure. It's in a point, and it's where you're coming from unconsciously. All of that thing is going to come through that as well. And be translated by whatever that fixed nature of it is.
Yeah, it's going to be translated. It's going to be denied. It's going to be projected. It's going to be distorted.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the consequence isn't just someone isn't like verbally an ideologue. Like they're also like caustically projecting and just energetically destructive.
Yeah, because there's such conflict with the world and with others,
and with self.
Yeah, and with one's own body, with one's own unconscious. So just that experience of, well, if this isn't in control, then what are you going with? And we all have our different ways that we're that we do it. I've probably told this story before, but I was just on a bike ride with someone, and then we decided, hey, let's go. We're kind of in the area. Let's go to. We're up by Lord Fletcher's,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, hey, let's go to Lord Fletcher's and have lunch.
Was it lobster day?
What's that?
Was it lobster day?
I don't remember if it was or not. And so the person I was with was, I'm just saying, she's probably never going to listen to this podcast. Because I'm going to make fun of her right now. But she didn't have her phone on her. It was I was wearing the backpack that had both our phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I know how to get there from here, and she didn't. And she's like, well, wait, let me see my phone. And I knew, and I was like, no, I know how to get there. And she's like, I know, but I just want to look on the GPS, and I had
I'm a lot like her. Yeah.
And I was like, just follow me,
Yeah.
And she was like, we rode for about 100 more yards, and then it was just like, will you just stop? I just want to look at my phone, And it was funny. We kind of got in a little bit of an argument, but it was mostly funny. But it was like, you cannot handle just like trusting and following me on a bike ride.
Yeah.
To a place that, even if I'm wrong and we get lost, it's going to be no big deal.
Yeah. I don't know though. Then you're like voluntarily letting someone potentially waste your effort.
Yep.
So there's like, if I could say, in defense of using it's a very good example. I like it, but it's hard to entrust that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And, and there's a balance, obviously, that to what extent do we take charge of ourselves, take charge of our own lives, take charge of our own beliefs?
Yeah.
We shouldn't just blindly be patriotic. We shouldn't just blindly trust our boss or blindly,
Yeah.
defend our family. It's like, well, wait a minute. We also should look at what's going on. And we should use critical thinking, and we should question, but at the same time, you can go too far the other way and be too locked in and identified with.
Yeah. It seems if you allow that confusional state, and then kind of there's like a bed underneath it. So you talk about like what is kind of arising up into that and then being translated into a thought or an idea.
Yeah.
That bed, how does that relate to intuition?
Well, I think it's a good question. My experience is we get all kinds of stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Right. Where we have ideas. And again, it's like, well, is that idea coming because it's a strategy to perpetuate your dysfunctional pattern? Is that idea coming in because your mom said so? Is that idea coming in because, it's out of just sort of programmed memory? Is it coming in because of some unconscious thing you don't even know? Is it an archetypal thing trying to express itself? Is it some kind of intuitive higher self message? And I think it's important to get more and more discerning of that.
Okay.
What is that? What, just as you sit there, it's a meditative practice. It's like, well, what comes to mind? And then whatever comes to mind, to examine it.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? And instead of like just jumping right in with a made up narrative or whatever, it's like, well, what is there, and where is that coming from? And you to a certain extent, you might notice energetically, it seems to be coming from above, or it's coming from below, or I'm saying that, and it's as if I'm like, it's as if I like pulled a string, and it's like,
Yeah.
like it's in here somewhere, and I'm just programmed like that.
To say it despite myself.
Yeah. Or you might be like, oh my God, that's my dad. That's my mom. And then just look at it, look at it. And maybe what your dad, it was like, and he was right,
Yeah.
Maybe it's, I'm going to not do that anymore because I'm going to not live by that belief or that program.
Yeah.
Or maybe I am. Now I'm going to quit being mad at him about that, because I can see that it was actually a way that he really helped me stay safe.
Yeah. We have like increased latency almost, or like I want to mix analogies, but the space you're talking about for that to arise, instead of like no space where it just has to like squeeze its way through. Yeah. But yeah, there's like, it's multi-dimensional what's being said even. And instead of like thinking that it's just one thing creeping through this conceptual lockdown, it's just one thing arising in this conceptual field.
Yeah. And the fact that it arises like doesn't mean that much.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it can, or it might not.
Well, it has the opportunity to, instead of just being this like seemingly narrative thread that continues unbroken through that point that is meaningless. Because it's by rote, it's automated.
Yeah.
So what are some things that like I know we're running out of time, so we can come back to this, but as you began to differentiate the different sources of those seeming ideas, like how, where, like, you've spoken to a lot of them. I think it's kind of, I think the reason I brought up intuition, or kind of like how, when it became obvious, like which things were consciousness or which things were from those dimensions that seem to like open up as a result of like the awakenings that you've had, versus like, oh, that's my dad, or like when they're, you know.
Mhm.
And there's just kind of, because I feel like as you begin to differentiate, there's different feelings to it as well. It's not just the content or the narrative. There's different places it seems to come from.
Yep. So what's the question?
Just like your experience of that, like as you kind of began to see where the different things came from for you, like what that felt like, or what that content was.
Man, there's a couple of key shifts that happened that I've spoken of before on here, where I was in college and I was wrestling with certain questions and felt like I felt like I was going crazy, and I felt like I have to figure this out. I got to get some kind of clear understanding of how things work, because it all seemed to be coming undone, and it all seemed to be tragic and horrible. And so my faith in whatever I thought I was believing in was rocked. And in the attempt to try to, I was reading all these philosophy books and books on Zen Buddhism, psychology, and it's like I was trying to arrive at my, at what was the true way to live, or the true way to think, or the true understanding. And I had an experience where it was like in the chaos and chaos and chaos. It was kind of like a Zen koan type experience where I felt like I was going mad, and then something happened, and I found myself aware of this desperate attempt to solve this problem, and I had a felt sense of a me looking at this problem that I thought that there was a me inside that had to, and it just shifted, and it was like, oh my God, it doesn't, not only am I not in there, and my survival, my validity, my goodness is dependent on me getting it organized correctly. Not only is there not a me in there, but rather that thing is in me. And then I became aware that, and the truth of that thing, the true answer, is that it's a dialectical infinite probability field. So there, that's the answer. That's that's the true nature of it. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but so the experience was just this, again, it was like, the experience I had in my mind was like, I found myself in water. I didn't know how to swim. I was flailing and flailing and flailing, and I was wearing out, and I was aware I'm going to go down. And I was desperate to try to find what to hang on to, because what I had hung on to all my life came undone on me. And somehow in the midst of all that, I started to notice buoyancy. It's the analogy would be, I started to notice buoyancy. And I started to become aware of, wait a second, the less I flail, and the less I try, and the less I constrict, the more buoyant I am. Just like in the water, if you get all rigid in your body, you're going to sink. But if you just relax, and it's like in my mind, I found that sense of buoyancy, and and there was a process, and I feel like that process continues. But today versus those years in college, it's like I didn't know how to swim then, and now I not only know how to swim, I'm aware that I float. And then however cheesy you want to get with the analogy, it's like, and then to a certain degree, I recognize I don't float. I'm a fish. And then of course it went further, and at a certain point, I started to have a felt sense of I'm actually also the ocean. And it's like, wow, what a different way to feel than when I was a sophomore in college. Like, it's radically different, to where I can't even hardly quite remember how awful that was.
Yeah, totally. It's like part of it seems like it happened to somebody else.
Yeah.
That chaotic feeling of like trying to figure that out, it was very, like, you could feel that. As you're talking about it, I can like feel like that terror, or like that impossible problem. It was good. I think that's I know we're out of time, but I think that's a good answer to it, as far as like what that pattern is, like how it's levels, and it's the same seeming thing over and over again, but it's kind of like the ever expanding sense of self, related to that core problem of like point versus field. So I liked how you kind of layered that on.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lance.
And I know you know a bit about that whole process yourself.
I liked how you laid it out. I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of what happened. That's nice. Because there's I also just like water analogies. Just been hung up on those. There's just nice like waves and wave forms in audio, and like the kind of like surge of energy of like a situation, and then how it dissipates. And how we're kind of like all living through these vignettes of like these rising and falling levels of energy. And how, like, if you start to see that, you kind of see like, well, what part am I playing in this round? This kind of like unfurling of energy in this moment, either with myself or with someone else. And it's kind of like you can feel when one like resolves and like moves on. And you're just kind of waiting for that next one to come. And then it's like, it can be a conversation, but it's just, you kind of feel those points, those like apexes and troughs of the interaction. So water's fun. It's good. Awesome.